All right. Welcome to On the Ball with me, Ric Bucher, on the United WeCast Network. You can see me on FS1 and hear me on Fox Sports Radio. Coming in May, you will be able to read me again in the form of my third book, this one on the value of being coachable, the secret to how legendary performers reached their highest potential so that you can reach yours. And this is where I've been saying for the last few months to stay tuned for when you can pre-order your copy. Well, that day has arrived. The link to pre-order is in the bio of all my social media accounts, or simply go to ricbucher.com. You can also follow me on X, the former Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at Ric Bucher. And then there's the YouTube channel, United WeCast, where you can see and hear me joined by Boki Nakbar talking about international hoops on Full Court Passport and covering all there is to know about both the NBA and college basketball with Brennan Haywood on Finding the Seams. Finally, there is Pacific Rims, where longtime Asian-based NBA executive Greg Stolt and I talk about the state of hoops in China, Japan, Korea, Australia, and beyond. I am a lot of places, but there's only one place you can hear just me talking about story angles and perspectives that you are not likely to find anywhere else, primarily, but not exclusively involving the NBA. And that is here. So, as I normally say in the intro, guest and co-host appearances are very rare on this show, but I am making an exception this episode for TJ Highley. He's an associate professor of math and computer science at LaSalle University, and he has created an array of formulas under the umbrella Carryover Lottery Allocation, or COLA, which is designed to eliminate tanking if adopted by the NBA. And you can find his description of the various formulas on YouTube. So with all of that, welcome to the show, Professor, Doctor. And let's start here. What was the inspiration to find an anti-tanking formula for the NBA?
Inspiration? I mean, it's one of those things that all NBA fans, I think, have thought about at some point. And I thought of this approach probably 5 years ago, and I floated it to some people. And I don't know if you've had these conversations, but everything just always gets shot down, and nobody really had any good criticisms for it.
Yeah.
But I didn't think much of it until this past summer. I was doing a research project with some students and looking for a topic, and I thought about this, and I thought, well, why don't we make this rigorous and see if it can really stand up to criticism and see where it lands. So we started taking a more scholarly look at it, and it held up.
So not that it matters, but are you a fan, an NBA fan of a particular team?
Yes, I follow the Sixers now. I grew up in Ohio in an NBA desert, and I adopted the Spurs as my team.
Okay.
Famously, when they were 4-6, the year that they won their first championship. And I followed Tim Duncan as a fan all the way through, pretty much till he retired. That was about the time that the process was starting to pay off, and Embiid was becoming prominent. So I was in the Philadelphia area, and I finally said, you know what? I'm just going to transfer my fandom.
You mentioned the process with the Sixers, and that was as a overt attempt at tanking and making tanking pay off as we've maybe ever seen in the NBA. Why weren't you pursuing or interested or looking at anti-tanking formulas then already?
It hadn't crossed my mind, I guess.
Okay.
It's one of those things we all think about when it's in the news. And at one point, I had a thought. And then last summer, I was doing a research project with some students, and we decided to take a closer look at this. And then in December, we were going very slowly with our work. We were meeting once a week, and most of our meetings were, let's pick it up next week. And then in December, the announcement came out, and realized, oh, you know what? We need to write this up and get it out. So we got the paper out in the next month, and trying to put it out there to see if it has legs and if it can become part of the conversation.
Can you give us an overview of the formula that you have created and what you think is unique about it?
Sure. The core insight is that we need to stop looking at regular season standings, regular season record. that is where people tank. They lose games in the regular season to get a draft advantage. And so instead, we're going to look at playoff success or lack thereof, that's the thing that teams don't fake. If you can't make the playoffs for 10 years, that means you're really terrible. Nobody is intentionally going to go 10 years and not make the playoffs. So that's where we're looking, is at playoff history, playoff track record. With that shift, the way that it works, every team is going to have a stockpile of tickets. We call that the lottery index, representing a stockpile of tickets that a team has. It grows and shrinks over time. It carries over from one year to the next. And it gets reduced every time a team wins in the lottery or wins in the playoffs. So you just get more and more tickets until something good happens. You get a playoff win, or you get a win in the lottery. And so you don't have any tanking, because I left this part off. This is the important part. The accrual of tickets, your stockpile, it grows, but it never grows more because you lose more. So that's where the no tanking part comes in.
Sure. And what's the distinction between lottery tickets and the system that we have now, where it's lottery ping pong balls?
Really, I just changed the terminology just to make sure that we're talking about a new system. And we use this term lottery tickets, same thing as lottery ping pong balls. It's the same idea. You throw them all in a hat, pull one out. But I did use the term lottery index for two reasons. One, it's a number associated with each team that carries over from year to year. So the fact that you get, your lottery index is 1,000, you get 1,000 tickets thrown into the hat, it doesn't mean you've lost those 1,000 tickets. They carry over to the next year. And also, everybody has a lottery index, even the teams that are in the playoffs, but they don't get to participate this year. So that's one of the things that helps, is that just because you make the playoffs doesn't mean you're giving up your chances for future years. So that takes away some of the incentive to potentially miss the playoffs. So you don't participate in the lottery, but the chances that the tickets that you've stored up, you don't lose them automatically from making the playoffs. It's only by advancing in the playoffs.
And is there anybody from the NBA that you've sort of vetted this with, or that you're going through trial and error, trying to understand the mentality and the psychology of NBA teams? Is there anybody that you ran this by or got insight from as you were developing it?
No, not as we were developing it. I have sent it to some people in the NBA, so hopefully we'll get some traction. But part of the advantage of the COLA framework is the flexibility. There's a lot of space. There's a design space here where you can tune it towards one priority or another. Mm-hmm. And I don't know where the NBA might land in that, but I think it's the framework where we should be talking, because in all of this, we can take tanking out of the question, out of the equation.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the reason that I had you on is because as I went through it, a lot of it makes a tremendous amount of sense and seems very sensible, although there is, I would say, considerable variation among your models, like in terms of where you put the parameters, right? And that's where it gets tricky, as I know the NBA, which is getting a consensus from NBA owners because of their varying influences and situations, the components of where they are, whether it's market, the amount of money they have, there's a half a dozen or more variables there. And that's where I see it as a challenge. And so that's where I jumped the gun here. I'm just wondering if you had the opportunity to present your idea, which is the one that you would go with, that you think is the most practical or conceivable to be adopted if you presented it to NBA owners and Adam Silver?
I would probably actually go with one that is not in the videos yet. I can present it for the first time here if you'd like.
Okay. Yeah.
And well, first let me say a couple things, just because the listeners, we skipped a couple things. What COLA does, Carryover Lottery Allocation, it provides the removal of tanking incentives while at the same time favoring the weak teams. There are a lot of proposals that can do one or the other. And there are other ways to do this, I'm sure, but I'm not aware of any of them that are also practical that has a chance of being adopted by the NBA. Most of them run into implementation details that become too difficult or political problems that the owners would just never go for it.
Right.
But within this framework, the trade-offs that are available largely have to do with simplicity or complexity. If you remove tanking, you may not help completely remove tanking. You may not help the worst teams as much as you want to. Mm-hmm. So there's a trade-off between helping the weak teams, accepting a little bit of tanking incentive hazard, or accepting more complexity. So those three things are kind of in tension with one another. So that's the broad strokes of where the trade-offs are. How simple versus complex, how much do you help the weak teams versus the unlucky teams, versus do you want teams that have recently been strong, do you want them to be able to rebound quickly? Because those are the three groups that you've got to kind of play off of one another. Mm-hmm. And then finally is other things like the whole trade system, how many restrictions you want to put into it. You make more restrictions, it can be simpler. It does need to be a little bit more complex if you want to keep it fair and keep the tanking incentives removed. If we want to talk about the version from the paper, in the version from the paper, I now call that classic cola because we've talked about some other flavors of cola since then. And just for people who haven't read the paper, let's go through what this one is. So for a specific instance, we need to know, how do we hand out tickets? For the classic cola variant, we give out 1,000 tickets to every team that misses the playoffs. For the reductions, the first place NBA champion, they lose all of their tickets. The runner-up loses 75%, 50% if you're a conference final participant. If you win one round, 25%. Similarly, the people who win the lottery, first pick loses 100%, and then 75, 50, and 25 for second, third, and fourth. So that is the classic cola that's in the paper. In that context, if you make a trade, the rules there were you are just not going to participate in the lottery. So you can trade a draft pick. But if you trade the draft pick before the lottery, it's just going to go based on standings, not based on the lottery, because we're not going to allow a traded pick to win the lottery at all. But you still, at that point, it is the same as what we have now, because it's just going to be based on the record. Where does a person finish? So in that sense, it doesn't change. The classic cola, the design goal there was minimal change from the current system to our system. At the time, I thought that was going to be a concern. Since then, they've floated the idea of abolishing the draft. I no longer think that is an important design consideration. It seems to me that we didn't need to design something trying to stay similar to the current system.
Yeah. I don't believe that while it has been floated, that's ever a realistic possibility of eliminating the draft. I know it sounds good, but
I think it sounds bad. I think it sounds bad.
Yeah. Because the alternative is all the college players or players coming into the NBA are essentially free agents, right? Mm-hmm. Which then means that there are no parameters, presumably, for signing them. And that's why you had a rookie salary scale in the first place, because you had players who had never touched an NBA court, had never dribbled or shot an NBA ball in an NBA game, and they were getting paid exorbitant numbers, far more than veterans and teams, because of the salary cap. I mean, if you're going to do that, if you're going to abolish the draft, then you have to abolish the salary cap as well, because otherwise financially it just doesn't work. Salary cap is part of my question here, because there's one element, and this goes not with your formula, which I appreciate it. It's the most sensible one that I have seen to this point of all the ones, and certainly more detailed. It makes a lot of sense, but it is built on the premise that every team, and I think you say it, every team is looking to win every game possible. That is the mantra or the drive of every NBA team. And not to be a cynic, but over my 30 years of covering the league, what I found is there are many teams or many owners that are simply looking to maximize their profits. They're not, they're happy that the valuation of their franchise is going to continue as they own it. And they want to figure out what's that sweet spot of spending just enough money to make my team relevant or to capture corporate sponsors and all that. But I don't want to impact my profit margin. And that's where it becomes difficult with any sort of anti-tanking sort of model, right? Is that not everybody is driven with the same goal.
I think you're getting at one of the core issues of where tanking comes from historically. That if you go back far enough, it was just a matter of we want to win the game for the sake of winning the game. And we want to win this game and the next game and the next game. At the end, we've got a record that tells us we were 500. Well, we can be better. Well, we were 600. We're pretty good. And so you just want to win every single game. There's inherent value in that. And then the draft pick was a consolation if you couldn't do that.
Right.
At some point, the regular season no longer has inherent value, at least not much. A single draft pick is worth, I'm going to go with all 82 games. If a team could conceivably say, we'll go 0-82 this year to get the number one draft pick, teams would do that if they could get away with it. There is zero inherent value in the regular season at this point, unfortunately. But there's still inherent value in the playoffs. And so what we have to do is recognize what do teams actually value. And based on that, we can then draw up incentives. Yep. Now, that's part of the problem is identifying where that is. I think a lot of fans are completely devoted to just the championship where, well, we only made the conference finals. This was a wasted season.
Right.
This is zero value. If that is how teams look at it, I don't think teams do. I think teams, for the most part, they want to make the playoffs and all right, we want to at least give it a shot, even if, we didn't go past the first round. It's better than not making the playoffs.
Yeah.
Which is a different view than 0-82 is the same as, 30-52.
Yeah. I think there's also a formula. A lot of teams follow a formula of how far can we go in the playoffs and what is it going to cost? And so, like, we can go get this extra player and we may not win a championship, but it might be the difference between getting out of the first round or going to the conference finals. Mm-hmm. And they make a financial decision in some of these instances where it's like, we don't want to spend the extra money because we're not guaranteed that we're going to get to the conference finals. And obviously there's a benefit, a financial benefit. The further you go in the playoffs, the more tickets you sell, et cetera, et cetera. But they don't necessarily want to roll that dice in order to see whether they can achieve that based on what the price is. I know I'm going to have to pay this. I don't know if I'm going to get the result that I'm looking for. And they're more conservative in that. And I think one of the things that you do that I find very interesting is, like, you introduce the idea of flexibility from year to year in terms of where the parameters are set based on having a panel or some sort of committee that determines those from year to year, because I think that would be important, because not every draft class, the potential talent coming in is not the same. And so when that changes, all the other parameters potentially change as well, as far as what the motivation is. You mentioned, like, the ability to save your tickets and bail out of a particular draft because we're not going to get the necessary bang for our lottery bucks. And so, but then that becomes an element with the NBA where you're introducing more outside influences in terms of how they do their business. And that challenge is the NBA.
It could be inside. There are a number of ways to handle the flexible line, the line between lottery teams and non-lottery teams. Mm-hmm. So just for the viewers to recap, if you've seen our videos, then you know all this. But in order to guarantee that teams are not going to tank. We have to know at what point do they view this level of success as better than the draft picks.
Right.
And, ideally they value regular season wins more than draft picks. I think that's the fallacy that we've had for a long time. Now we can hopefully say they prefer the playoffs to having a high draft pick. And I think that's true most years. Maybe not this year, maybe not in the Wemby year, but most years, all of the teams are going to say, I'd rather be in the playoffs than roll the dice on a lottery.
Yeah.
But on a year where it's really strong, like Wemby or like this year, there will be teams that will say, I don't even want to be in the playoffs. I want to be in the lottery. You could give me a free playoff spot and I would say no.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you're going to have tanking. And so the idea of a flexible line is that we recognize when those years happen and we just say, okay, whoever is in the playoffs and loses in the first round, you can still be in the lottery.
Yeah.
Or maybe the second round. Or again, I can't really imagine this. Maybe you have to go all the way up and say, NBA champion, you can also be in the lottery. Whatever it takes to not incentivize tanking.
Yeah.
Now, there's trade-off here. You've got complexity to have a flexible line. Who's going to decide? Or you set a static line. And if you set a static line, like we have right now at the playoff margin, there's a risk that in some years teams will tank.
Right.
On the other hand, if you set it too high, the risk there is you don't give as much help to the weak teams because so many teams are getting that benefit.
I think ultimately it comes down to you're never going to completely eliminate the interest in tanking completely. There's always going to be some wiggle room there or a reason. Again, I suppose if you put enough variables in there in terms of controlling it from year to year, you could get it down pretty far. But
just to jump in, there are definitely ways to get rid of tanking. The problem is getting rid of tanking while helping the weak teams. I mean, the wheel is going to get rid of tanking.
Okay, fair. But in the reality of the NBA, when you have the disparity in markets, you have to have, like, it's not realistic that you could put in place the things that would even the playing field because the playing field is not even. Is that fair?
It's fair to say that they're never going to approve something that doesn't provide help for the weak teams.
Right.
You agree with that? And
it's never always going to be weaker teams simply based on the parameters and how the NBA is built and the relative relationships of the particular teams.
Yes.
Tell people where they can find, because obviously this was more me exploring my interest and my questions. For those who would like to get the real stuff that you have presented and the details on your formulas, where can people find them?
So I'm not a YouTuber, but I just started my YouTube channel really for this, and I'm at, what am I even at? See, I do this so little. It's at Highley_TJ.
At Highley.
Yes.
TJ.
Yeah, that's where I have a few YouTube explainer videos. Our research paper is out on Archive. Full confession, is not yet peer reviewed, but it is out on Archive. There are some scholars who have read it, so in that sense it's peer reviewed, but it has not gone through a blind peer review at this point.
Yeah.
Hopefully we get famous enough that it can never be blind. You want me to talk through Simple Cola? Okay, so I don't have a video for this one yet, but this is based on the idea that simplicity is king. So how do we make this as simple as possible and still something that's practical to implement? And it's not even going to sound like cola, but trust me, it is. This is the variant where we get rid of the lottery. So if you want to prefer, it's the carryover non-lottery allocation, where there is no lottery, and we simply give the first pick to whichever team has the longest drought, where the drought is no playoff series win and no top 3 draft pick. So whoever's gone the longest without getting any success in the playoffs and also no top 3 draft pick, they get to go first. And then to incentivize winning among tied teams, most wins gets to go first. So if there are 5 teams that have not had any playoff success or draft help in 5 years, they're all tied for first. It's a race to see who gets the number one pick, whoever of the non-lottery teams. So, I mean, I'm sorry, of the non-playoff teams. So again, if you're in the playoffs, you win a playoff series, then you don't get to participate. But if you lose your playoff series, then you would still get to participate.
Okay.
So that's it.
All right.
All right.
Well, listen, thank you very much. Appreciate the time and good luck. And I hope at some point you get an audience with the commissioner.
Thanks.
All right. That was Professor T.J. Highley from LaSalle University. I brought him on just because, look, tanking is such a huge topic right now with the NBA and with fans, and people are putting out a lot of ideas and suggestions that like eliminating the draft that are so simplistic and not realistic when it comes to the reality of the NBA. And that's one of the challenges even with Professor Highley's presentation or suggestion or formula, because there are so many variables among the NBA teams. You do have weaker teams. You do have weaker markets. And, the fans in Utah and Charlotte and Sacramento love to suggest that the media, of which I am part, just don't want to see them succeed or try to run off their stars to bigger markets. I get nothing out of that. I get something out of the NBA being a healthy, robust organization that has multiple storylines. And when underdogs in small markets succeed in spite of the challenges against them, that's a great story. So I am in no way against any small market team being successful, but I know the reality of business. And why I raised it with the professor is that we have this pie in the sky thinking that the objective of every single team in the NBA is to win and to win a championship. And that's just not true. It is a business. And going back to the days of Donald Sterling, who I think was the genesis and the inspiration for what a lot of owners are doing today. Donald Sterling, former owner of the Clippers, never invested in the team. They played in the LA sports arena. They would average 5,000 fans or so. He continued to sell the hope with high draft picks of they were going to build a team that was going to be meaningful. And every once in a while, he would sign a big name veteran player at the end of their run. Dominique Wilkins immediately comes to mind. And so it had fans consistently believing, okay, at some point we're going to turn the corner. And he took advantage of selling that hope and keeping the margins right in terms of what his costs were to be what I was told making or clearing $40 million a year. And at some point, all the owners coming in who all they wanted to do was win a championship. They wanted to show I can run an NBA team that can win a title. I know how to do this. And then they realized how much expense went into it and the gamble that you had to make, because you had to spend the money up front and then hope that it would result in winning a championship. They finally realized Donald's on to a better formula. He's guaranteed of putting money in his pocket. And yeah, he doesn't get the opportunity to be all excited and walk around town proclaiming that he's the owner of the champion Los Angeles Clippers, but he does get to still be in the circle of NBA owners and hang with some of the greatest athletes in the world. And he doesn't have to pay the same price as everybody else. And you just look at the ratio, it's one champion every year. It could be multiple teams that end up making a lot of money. And if you find the right formula, you can be lauded by your city and your community for having a successful team and a successful season without going through the wall to win everything. And that, in a way, brings me to the Denver Nuggets, the one other subject that I wanted to hit in this episode. Denver Nuggets probably should have won more than one championship with Nikola Jokić and the group that they've had, but they only have one. I thought that this might be the year that they would get another one because of some of the moves that they've made. And I'm starting to rethink that position, that I may have been wrong about the Nuggets in the trade that sent Michael Porter Jr. and a future first-round pick to the Brooklyn Nets in exchange for Cam Johnson, along with the reacquisition of free agent Bruce Brown. I thought both moves were smart and would make them a stronger title contender. I believe I even had them favored to win it all this season, with the mess created by former coach Mike Malone and the GM Calvin Booth behind them. And that's why I would argue that the Nuggets and Jokić should have had more than one title. Had they not been going through what they went through last year, I would argue that they were primed to take it all. They came close as it was. But in any event, and let me say right off the bat, David Adelman, Malone's replacement, is not at all a reason for my second guessing myself. Yes, this is his first time as a head coach. I thought he did a remarkable job last year, keeping them together, and this year he has done an outstanding job navigating a slew of injuries this season. And maybe it's simply social media and what I'm being fed on my timeline, but the number of fans who think they know how to coach an NBA team better than the likes of Steve Kerr or Adelman appears to be a growing number. It appears to be an epidemic. And while their theories and analysis only expose just how clueless they are about basketball in general and the NBA in particular in terms of how it works, it's still annoying. The grousing about starting lineups and rotations and minutes seems to be at an all-time high, without any regard to the complexities that are faced by coaches in general and NBA coaches in particular when it comes to those decisions. Same goes for the composition of championship teams and how fans look at them. Today's analytic nerds believe there is a formula for building a title-winning team. If you can just get the numbers right, I need a guy that produces this, plus a guy that produces this, plus a guy who produces this. And I would say they are right in one respect. There is a formula for being the last team standing in any one NBA season, but they are dead wrong in that anyone has come close to discovering it. This is what I've learned about people who are smart. They know what they don't know. They may have a certain area of expertise, but they're aware that that is an area and it's not all encompassing. So anytime I hear somebody who's like, first of all, advertising that they're really smart, and then believe that they've got it, they know it all. Well, that's why we call them know-it-alls. It's not a compliment. And it generally is a reflection of they are ignorant in ways because they don't realize that there is a wide field of things that they are not aware of or they don't know. And that generally happens with people who aren't in a particular field. They don't realize that they don't know what they don't know. And I think in today's world where we are victims of that tenfold. Somehow we got to this place where we believe that people who have never done something before or have never worked in a particular industry or were never in politics are somehow better or smarter or more capable than someone who's been in it. I've never known that to be the case in anything. Neophytes do not have success. They might bring something new to the table, but their ability to understand everything and get it done in short order, simply, it does not happen. And I'm guilty of not always considering everything that I should have, or after the fact realizing that I missed the mark. And I'm feeling that way about the Nuggets. And the reason that I'm second guessing myself is that I did not consider one vital component that the Nuggets are now missing now that Porter Jr. is in Brooklyn and Bruce Brown essentially replaced Russell Westbrook on the roster. But first, this is why I endorsed the trade, why I thought it would make them better. For anyone familiar with MPJ and his time with the Nuggets, he's not a very smart player. He is a player that goes by feel, shall we say. Talented, not a high basketball IQ guy. And I can't speak for him off the court, but you could see it when he was playing. Frequently, one confused individual on the court. Cam Johnson, on the other hand, pretty perceptive when it comes to understanding what he is supposed to do and how he fits into the scheme of things. What I liked about the return of Bruce Brown, who was part of the Nuggets championship team, is the personality and bravado that he brings. And I thought that they were missing that to some extent the last few years. Too many quiet guys. Not enough bleep talkers, if you will. I believe that's one of the big reasons Jokić endorsed getting Russell Westbrook and why he was sad to see him go. Brown, I thought, was a suitable replacement and would bring more stability. I felt the same way with Cam versus MPJ. Maybe couldn't hit the heights, either Brown or Cam, capable of the highest highs that Westbrook and Porter could provide you, but we're going to be steadier. And with guys like Jokić able to hit those highs, I thought that would result in more success. There were just too many games in recent years where the Nuggets needed Porter to step up or just be present, and he would be AWOL just too many times. Or maybe those times when he was AWOL and I'm like, man, come on, Michael, this is the time for you to shine. This is the time for you to step up. They need you right now. And that's when he would be largely invisible or confused or look hesitant or simply not deliver. And certainly he had huge games. And maybe that was the enticement. Like, you knew what he was capable of. He just couldn't give it to you on a consistent basis. But his scoring from the perimeter, I never questioned that Cam Johnson would be able to score at a higher clip than Porter at his best. I just thought he'd be more consistently. He wouldn't give you a 30-point game or a 30 and 15 rebound game, but he'd never give you, a 2 for 9 or a 1 for 5. Because the games that Porter didn't show up, it wasn't because he was missing. It was because, for whatever reason, he just wasn't aggressive. But the component I overlooked with both Porter and Westbrook was their rebounding. Westbrook is one of the best all-time rebounding guards in the history of the NBA. Porter was the second best rebounder, even with Aaron Gordon on the team. Second best rebounder on a consistent basis behind Jokić for the Nuggets. I knew Cam wasn't the rebounder that Porter is, but I thought his efficiency, again, and consistent effort would counter the loss of rebounds or maybe even produce more than Cam historically was capable of providing. Because that's one of the other elements, is that when you have guys like Aaron Gordon and Jokić, who are the primary concern of the opponent to keep off the boards, an active, aware player can pick up a lot of rebounds. I do believe that Porter benefited from that. And I thought Cam, in spite of not having very good rebounding numbers for the better part of his career, might be able to take advantage of that too. And I would say, since watching Cam with the Denver Nuggets, the difference in pure athleticism between Porter and Cam is far more obvious than I previously realized. Here's where I'm not sure fans or analytic nerds even understand the numbers they're enamored with, though, and how they're interconnected. Because my big concern in watching the Nuggets isn't purely their rebounding and where they're ranked. It's their inability to close games against the top teams. They seem to be out-executed far too often in possession-by-possession games at crunch time. And that will always be an issue to a certain extent when the closer is your big man, Jokić, because it isn't always easy to get him the ball. He generally is not going to bring up the ball, unlike Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or Anthony Edwards. And so we've seen the tactics used to surround him or get smaller, stronger players into his legs, fronting him, doing all kinds of things just to burn precious seconds off the clock, off the shot clock, off the game clock. And at the end of games, time is of the essence. The Nuggets' ability to close games, though, I believe is compounded by their increased weakness as rebounders, because it means that the opponents are more likely to get more bites of the apple in the waning seconds rather than one and done opportunities. And mentally, teams that are able to rebound well know that, okay, we might give up one shot, but that's it. And opponents know the same thing. We may only get one shot at scoring on this possession. And it puts a pressure on them and causes them to, in many cases, either take early shots, which then creates more opportunity at the other end, or it prompts them to, well, we got to get a really good shot because we don't know if we're going to get a second one. And that then prompts them to work deeper into the shot clock and maybe put pressure on themselves that they otherwise wouldn't face. When you can offensive rebound against a team, you're just looking, we get a shot up. If we miss, no problem. We're going to get another one. Against really good defensive rebounding teams, the mentality is completely different. And that can loom large at the end of games. Now, there are a couple of things to acknowledge. One, the Porter Jr. trade was as much about reducing payroll as anything else. Cam is making almost half of what Porter will over the next 2 seasons. And both Aaron Gordon and Jokić missing significant time this season has no doubt also impacted their rebounding numbers. But another factor in the formula for championship teams is how personalities mesh and how the roles those personalities play based on the size of their role in a particular season. Peyton Watson, for example, with the Nuggets, has seen his role expand and has performed incredibly well, at least production-wise. Christian Braun continues to improve. But Jamal Murray is still the default closer when they can't get the ball to Jokić quickly enough. And while Jamal will never shy away from taking the big shot, what I've seen over the years is that he generally needs a few cracks at knocking down that big shot. And when a team doesn't rebound well, it means the ratio of chances in the final minute is going to swing to the opponent. And that ratio can mean everything when it comes to winning in the postseason. When you add Peyton Watson being a little more aggressive with his offense and Christian Braun being a little more aggressive with his offense, and both of those players feeling a little more entitled to take a shot or attack given the opportunity, that is going to mean fewer opportunities for Jamal. And we're already talking about a pool of opportunities at the end of games that is smaller for the Nuggets because they don't offensively rebound well. And at the other end, the opposition is getting more opportunities because they don't rebound well defensively. So the bottom line is I'm looking at all of the Nuggets components. They have not come together in the way that I thought that they would. Their strengths don't compensate well enough for their weaknesses. And it's why I'm now questioning if they truly have what it takes to come out of the West. If everyone is healthy, maybe they will have enough. And I could potentially change my opinion once we see Aaron Gordon completely back, Nikola Jokić completely back, and if they still stay healthy. But if compromised, it's pretty clear that they don't have enough unless they run into a string of opponents equally compromised, equally unable to shade their weaknesses with their strengths, which does happen. And that is yet one more part of the formula. What is the path to a title in a given year? And that's one that all the analytics in the world will never be able to predict. All right, that does it for this episode of On the Ball on the United WeCast Network. Please rate and review the show on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. By the way, On the Ball is sponsored by the new Air Club, a door-to-door private jet service that will take care of your every need at an unbeatable price. What sets New Air apart is that it does more than arrange your private jet and crew. They will handle ground transportation, hotel, catering requests, security, you name it. And because they bundle their service, you can be sure the trip will cost exponentially less. Not everyone can afford private jet travel, but for those who can, make sure you're getting as much luxury for every dollar as you deserve. Check out their website at newairclub.com to see exactly how luxurious travel can be. All right, that does it for this episode. I'll see you next week.